Hey everyone, and welcome back to AI Weekly. It's December 30th, 2024, and we have a lot to get to this week.
Yeah, another busy week in the world of AI.
Let's jump right in. First up is Deepseek V3.
It's an open source AI model coming out of China, getting a lot of attention lately.
From what I've seen, it's rivaling the performance of models made by those big companies like, OpenAI and Google.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big deal for an open source project.
For sure. And it's built using this mixture of experts approach, which, I'll be honest, I don't really know much about.
Oh, well, think of it this way. Instead of having one giant AI model that's trying to do everything, imagine you have a team of AI specialists.
Okay.
Each trained on a very specific domain or task, so when a request comes in, the model figures out which expert would be the best to use for it.
Oh, so it's like a divide and conquer kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that seems to be why Deepseek V3's training time is so fast, too. They were able to train this massive model. It's got like 671 billion parameters with only 2.788 million GPU hours.
Wow, and they use those Nvidia H800 GPUs for that.
Yep, and that's way less time than what we've seen with other large language models.
Yeah, that's crazy, but there's a catch, right, with Deepseek V3.
Right, so Deepseek V3 has some censorship built into it that lines up with the Chinese government.
Makes sense.
So even though it's open source in terms of the code, it's not really open when it comes to the information it can access.
Yeah, definitely raises some interesting questions about, the balance between performance and control.
Especially with open source AI, it's complicated for sure.
For sure. Okay, moving on. Nvidia is continuing to be a dominant force in AI by buying Run.ai for, get this, $700 million.
It was bound to happen. This gives Nvidia 80% of the GPU market share.
So they're the leader in AI hardware.
Pretty much.
And Run.ai specializes in what? AI infrastructure optimization? What does that even mean?
Basically, it means they help companies use and run their AI stuff in a more efficient way.
So it seems like Nvidia isn't just selling chips anymore.
Right, now they're getting into the whole ecosystem of developing and using AI.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this means for the AI world.
It might raise some antitrust concerns.
Yeah, I think the European Commission has already okayed the deal, but the U.S. Department of Justice is still looking into it.
Right.
Okay, next up, the Israeli Defense Forces are apparently using AI to better target Hamas and Hezbollah.
Yeah, the sources mention a system called Habsora, which it analyzes data from things like communications and satellite imagery, even social networks, to create this target bank.
It's like an AI intelligence analyst or something.
Pretty much it helps the IDF figure out who to target more effectively.
It's pretty crazy to think that AI can do that kind of stuff now.
Especially at a speed that humans just can't match.
Yeah, that's kind of scary to think about all those ethical questions, too, about AI and warfare.
For sure. We'll definitely have to take a deeper dive into that later.
For sure. Okay, switching gears a bit. OpenAI, the guys who made ChatGPT are planning a major restructuring.
Yeah, they're trying to become a public benefit corporation in Delaware, which means that there won't be profit caps for investors.
I see.
And they're doing this because OpenAI needs a ton of money to keep developing their AI, which, as you know, is incredibly expensive.
Makes sense, but this is causing some issues, right?
Definitely. Some people, even Elon Musk, who co-founded OpenAI, are worried that this is going to mess with OpenAI's original goal.
Which was?
To make sure AI helps all of humanity,
Oh, right.
Now it seems like they might be more focused on profits.
Yeah, I see. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Absolutely.
All right, next up we have Cambricon Technologies. They make AI chips in China.
And their stock has gone up like crazy.
So much.
Almost 400% in 2024.
Whoa, what's causing that?
It seems like it's a few things. The Chinese government is really supporting their own tech companies.
Okay.
Especially with all the trade restrictions that are preventing them from getting those high-end AI chips from Nvidia.
Right, they can't rely on American companies anymore. So China needs to be able to make their own AI hardware.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk regulations now. New York State now has a law that requires government agencies to be more open about how they're using AI.
Yeah, this new law is all about accountability. Agencies have to tell everyone how they're using AI, especially if it involves decisions that could affect people's benefits and services.
So basically making sure that a human is involved in the process.
And that AI isn't being used to, harm or disadvantage people.
Especially when it comes to those essential services.
Right. It's a step in the right direction for ethical and responsible AI in the government.
All right, now for some sad news. The family of Suchir Balaji a researcher who used to work at OpenAI, are asking for the FBI to investigate his death.
It's a really sad story. Balaji was found dead in his apartment, and although officials are saying it was a suicide, his family isn't so sure.
Yeah, they don't think it adds up.
And what makes this whole thing even more complicated is that Balaji was openly critical of OpenAI.
Really?
Yeah, he had some serious concerns about how AI was being developed.
I wonder what those were.
Well, he was worried about the use of copyrighted stuff being used to train those big language models like ChatGPT.
I see.
He thought it was, wrong and maybe even illegal to just take data from the internet without permission.
That's interesting.
He was also worried about the potential for AI to spread fake news and manipulate people.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't keep these thoughts to himself. He actually spoke out publicly about it, which is pretty brave considering who he was going up against.
Yeah, it's not easy to stand up to these big tech companies.
It's not. So whether or not there's something more to his death, this whole situation really brings up questions about how open and accountable the AI industry really is.
Yeah, it does. Okay, last but definitely not least, we have Geoffrey Hinton, sometimes called the godfather of AI, who is worried about the risks that AI poses to humanity's existence.
He actually thinks there's a 10-20% chance that AI could wipe us out within the next 30 years. Yeah, he is really concerned about how fast AI is developing and how hard it would be to control these systems that could become smarter than us.
I mean, it's a pretty serious warning coming from someone like him, someone who's been in AI research for so long.
Definitely makes you think.
It does. Okay, so we just went through a ton of news.
We did.
For our deep dive today, I'm really interested in talking about the IDF and how they're using AI in warfare.
Yeah, definitely a lot to discuss there. So many ethical and practical issues to consider.
Absolutely. It brings up some important questions about what war will look like in the future and how much human judgment will be involved in it.
Yeah, for sure. But before we dive into that, I'd also like to talk more about Deepseek V3.
It's okay.
Especially the built-in censorship. I think that's super important to discuss in terms of open source AI and what it all means.
Hey, sounds good. So listeners, stick with us while we take a deeper look into these two stories after a quick break.
See you in a few. Welcome back to AI Weekly. So before the break, we were talking about Deepseek V3 and the IDF using AI in warfare. Let's start with Deepseek V3. I think you were curious about the mixture of experts approach.
Yeah, that was pretty smart, like a really efficient way to build an AI model.
Right.
But I'm still a little confused about how it actually works, in practice.
Okay, well, think of it like this. Imagine you've got a bunch of specialists. Each one is like an expert in their own field. You wouldn't ask a heart surgeon to do brain surgery, right?
No, definitely not.
So it's kind of the same idea with a mixture of experts AI model. Instead of having one huge neural network that's trying to do everything, you break it up into smaller networks that are specialized. And each of these networks are trained on a specific task or type of data.
Oh, okay. So like one expert might be really good at understanding language, while another is good at recognizing images.
Yeah, exactly. And when someone asks the model to do something, there's like a gating network that looks at what's being asked and decides which expert or group of experts would be the best to handle it. And then it sends the request to those specific experts, and they all work together.
So it's like having a whole team of AI specialists.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And this approach has a lot of advantages. Like, it can make the model a lot more accurate and efficient.
How so?
Well, by focusing on just one specific task, each expert can become really good at it, much better than a general purpose model could.
That makes sense. And you mentioned earlier that Deepseek V3 was trained really quickly. Is that because of this mixture of experts approach?
It definitely helps, by dividing up the work among these specialized experts. You can cut down on the overall training time and the resources you need. Remember, they were able to train a model with 671 billion parameters using only 2.788 million GPU hours, which is super impressive.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing. But we can't forget about the censorship aspect of Deepseek V3.
Right, and that's where things get really interesting. The information we have doesn't go into too much detail about how the censorship is actually implemented, but it does mention that certain topics and keywords are blocked.
So if someone tries to use Deepseek V3 to find out about, let's say, the Tiananmen Square protests or criticize the Chinese government, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, most likely. And that raises a lot of questions about the future of open source AI. On one hand, you have these open source models like Deepseek V3 that could make AI technology available to anyone, researchers, developers, businesses all over the world.
But then on the other hand, if these models have censorship built in, it could really limit what people can do with it.
Yeah, it's a tough balance, and it's not just a problem for China. Governments all over the world are trying to figure out how to regulate AI,
Right.
and there's a real danger that national interests and political agendas could end up influencing how these AI systems are developed and used.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like we're entering a new era of the internet, where the information you can access and what you're allowed to say could be controlled by AI algorithms run by governments or corporations.
It's something to definitely keep an eye on, and it highlights how important it is to have open and honest discussions about the ethics of AI development. We need to make sure this technology is used responsibly and for the benefit of everyone.
Totally agree. Okay, let's switch gears now and talk about the IDF using AI in warfare. You mentioned the Habsora system earlier.
Yeah, this story really caught my attention because it shows how AI is changing how wars are fought. Habsora, as we said before, is an AI system that analyzes a ton of data to help the IDF find and target potential threats.
What kind of data does it use? The sources mentioned communications, satellite imagery, and social networks. What does that all mean?
Okay, imagine you're trying to track down a really important target in a dangerous place. You might have intercepted some communications that mention a certain location or a fake name. You might also have satellite images that show something suspicious happening in that same area. And then you might have social media posts from people connected to the target that show where they've been or who they're connected to.
So Habsora basically takes all of this information, analyzes it, and then finds patterns or connections that a human might miss.
Exactly. It's like having a super smart intelligence analyst that can look through tons of data instantly and figure out what it all means. And this can be a huge advantage in a war.
But as you mentioned earlier, there are some serious ethical concerns with this kind of technology. What are some of the risks of using AI to make life or death decisions in war?
One of the biggest worries is bias. Just like any AI, Habsora is only as good as the data it's trained on. So if that data is messed up, biased, or incomplete, it could lead to inaccurate or even dangerous recommendations.
So for instance, if Habsora is trained on data that mostly flags certain groups of people as potential threats, it could end up targeting innocent people.
Exactly, and that's a huge problem because in a war, mistakes can be deadly. Another concern is the lack of transparency and accountability.
What do you mean by that?
Well, AI systems can be really complicated, and it's not always clear how they come to their decisions, which makes it hard to hold someone responsible if something goes wrong.
So if Habsora picks a target that turns out to be a civilian, or if it causes the conflict to escalate, who's to blame? The AI. The people who created it. The military commanders who said it was okay to use it.
Those are really tough questions, and there aren't any easy answers, but they're questions we need to be asking. As AI becomes more common in warfare, we need to make sure there's human oversight and that people are held accountable, and that these systems are designed and used in a way that minimizes harm to civilians and doesn't accidentally make the war worse.
It sounds like a really tricky situation, trying to balance the potential benefits of AI in the military with the risks of bias, lack of transparency, and the potential for AI to make decisions that could have terrible consequences.
You got it. And that's why it's so important to talk about it. We can't just blindly use AI in war without thinking about the ethics and what could go wrong.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot with these two deep dives. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think the main takeaway is that AI is a super powerful tool that has the potential to change our world in both good and bad ways. It's up to us to use it wisely, ethically, and for the good of everyone. And that means having open and honest conversations about the risks, the challenges, and the possibilities that AI brings.
Absolutely. It also takes vigilance, awareness, and a willingness to really engage with these issues as a society. We can't just leave the future of AI in the hands of a few tech companies or governments. We all need to be involved in shaping this technology and making sure it's used for good.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right. That's it for this week's episode of AI Weekly. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of artificial intelligence. Be sure to tune in next week for more news and insights.
Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and stay involved in shaping the future of AI. Bringing us back to that story about Suchir Balaji.
Yeah, it's really shaken up the AI world.
It is. So Suchir Balaji, a researcher at OpenAI, was found dead in his apartment in San Francisco last month.
And his death was ruled a suicide, but his family is saying that's not what happened, and they want a full investigation.
Yeah, and what makes this whole thing even more, unsettling is that Balaji was openly critical of OpenAI, the company he worked for.
So he was a whistleblower.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but he was also raising some really important ethical concerns about the way AI is being developed, and these concerns are shared by a lot of people. Well, he was especially worried about the use of copyrighted material in training these large language models like ChatGPT. He thought it was wrong, maybe even illegal, to just take data from the internet without getting permission.
I see.
He was also worried about how AI could be used to spread misinformation, fake news, and manipulate people.
That's a valid concern.
And he didn't just talk about this stuff privately. He actually went public with his criticisms, which is pretty brave considering he was going up against one of the most powerful AI companies out there.
Yeah, not many people would do that.
So whether or not there's more to his death, this whole situation really makes you think about how transparent and accountable the AI industry really is.
For sure. It makes you wonder what's really going on behind closed doors.
It does. And I think Balaji's case shows us that we can't just focus on the amazing things AI can do and ignore the ethical side of it.
Right. We have to consider the consequences.
Exactly. We need to create an environment where researchers and developers feel like they can speak up about their concerns without being afraid of losing their jobs or being silenced.
Absolutely. And we need to demand more transparency from these AI companies. They need to be more open about how they're developing and using these powerful technologies.
This isn't just about protecting individual researchers. It's about protecting the future of AI and making sure it's used for good.
Well said. I think Balaji's story should be a wake-up call for all of us. We need to make sure that progress in AI doesn't come at the expense of human well-being.
Yeah, we need to move forward carefully and responsibly, recognizing that AI has the power to completely change our society.
It really does. Well, I think that's all the time we have for this week.
It is.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of AI Weekly. We had some really thought-provoking discussions today.
We did, and we hope you'll join us again next week for more news and insights from the world of AI.
Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and keep asking those tough questions about the future of AI.